10 minutes before the vows, my fiancée climbed out a bathroom window to run off with the assistant she swore was just a coworker and left me at the altar in front of 400 guests and two merged family empires. The family's fix was to shove her 29-year-old aunt into the dress, Riini, their real heir, colder and sharper and lovelier than her runaway niece could dream of being, a beauty that left runway models rethinking their careers and made even the suspiciously stunning cashiers look ordinary. The most dangerous, gorgeous, impossible woman I'd wanted since long before I got engaged, the one I'd spent 5 years pretending not to stare at. Trading a woman who couldn't stay loyal for a weekend for the one person in that family I'd never stopped wanting. Losing a cheater to gain her wasn't a tragedy. It was the luckiest day of my life. Let me back up 10 minutes to the part where I didn't yet know that getting jilted was the best thing that would ever happen to me. The bathroom window was 41 inches off the ground and Una cleared it in heels. I know it was 41 inches because the wedding planner measured it later on her knees in a $2,000 dress, whispering the number like it was a crime scene. It was technically. The crime was against me. A bridesmaid found me in the vestibule and delivered the news. She didn't say "gone the way you'd announce a death." She said it the way you'd tell someone their food was ready. Chipper, slightly relieved, like she'd been holding the sentence for an hour and was glad to finally put it down. "Gone where?" I asked. "With Damon." Damon the assistant. The just a coworker. A phrase that in my experience is only ever spoken by people who are at that exact moment texting the coworker. I stood there and did the math a groom does. 400 guests. Two empires that had signed an alliance on the assumption that their children could tolerate each other for a photograph. A string quartet already 40 seconds into something by Pachelbel, and a bride currently going over a windowsill to freedom with a man whose entire personality was a firm handshake. My heart, for the record, did not shatter. It did something more embarrassing. It sped up to the tempo of a washing machine hitting an unbalanced load and kept a secret from everyone in the room, because here is the thing nobody at that wedding knew, and the thing I would have died before admitting. I was not devastated. I was terrified. I looked too calm. So I built the correct face. There is a specific expression a man is supposed to wear when his bride abandons him at the altar: wounded, dignified, quietly wronged, the face of a good man. The world has failed. I had roughly 6 seconds to assemble it before the first relative rounded the corner, and I assembled it flawlessly. Jaw tight, eyes down, a slow, brave breath. If they gave awards for suffering with grace, I'd have needed a bigger mantle. The hall was already unraveling. Una's mother, Vera, arrived at a speed I didn't know she owned, makeup holding on for its life, hissing about the guests, the alliance, the shame, in that order, because in Vera's world shame is a line item and it comes after the balance sheet. Somebody's uncle was on the phone with somebody's lawyer. A cousin was live streaming, then wasn't because a larger cousin took her phone. The quartet, God bless them, kept playing, professionals. Then the room went quiet and I knew before I turned around who had walked in. You develop a sense for it the way a barometer knows the storm before the sky does. Renee entered the way weather enters, not loudly, just completely, and 400 people who had been screaming a moment ago found other things to do with their mouths. 29 years old, 5 years older than me, and roughly a century more composed. Glossy, dark hair pinned up like she had somewhere important to be after this, and this was slowing her down. Cool, unreadable eyes doing a slow inventory of the disaster and pricing it. The family's real heir, the one the billionaires in the pews lowered their voices around. I had been quietly, uselessly, catastrophically in love with her for 5 years, and I had spent every one of them pretending I wasn't looking. I'd gotten good at it, apparently not good enough, but I didn't know that yet. Old Soren spoke, the grandfather, the patriarch, the one man in that family whose disapproval could actually move a stock price. He tapped his cane once on the marble, and the sound landed like a gavel. "The alliance stands," he said to the room, to the lawyers, to God. "The wedding will proceed." There was a pause where a normal family might have asked to which bride. Soren looked at Renee. Renee looked at me, and I understood with the cold clarity of a man watching his own luck arrive and address what was being proposed. They were going to put the aunt in the gown. I want to be clear about my behavior in this moment because it matters. I did not smile. I did not do a small joyful hop. I kept the wounded groom face bolted on, nodded once like a man accepting a burden for the good of two great houses, and said with the gravity of a hostage negotiator, "If it will protect both families, I'll do what I have to." What I had to do was marry the one I'd wanted since before I ever met the one who ran. Truly the sacrifices we make. They swapped her in. Someone produced a second ring, a better ring I noticed, heavier, older, the kind of ring that had opinions. The priest, a professional to rival the quartet, simply changed the name in his notes and carried on. And here is the part one keep turning over. When he asked Rianne if she would take me in sickness, in health, all of it, she said, "I do," before he finished the sentence. No hesitation. No brave little breath. No flicker of a woman being talked into anything. I'd braced for reluctance. I got a signature so fast it embarrassed the pen. I met her eyes for exactly 1 second, and she held mine like she'd been expecting me for a while, and I was finally blessedly on time. Everyone in that hall thought they were watching a family save face. I was the only one who noticed that Rianne hadn't been rescued into this. She'd walked in. The bridal suite had been decorated for a different couple. Someone had strung little paper hearts across the headboard for Una, and now they hung over Rianne and me like evidence at a trial nobody had cleaned up yet. Rianne looked at them for exactly 1 second, then looked at me as if I'd chosen them personally. "Sit," she said not unkindly, "the way you tell furniture where to go." I sat. She stayed standing, which meant she was about to negotiate, and she negotiated the way other people breathe. "We keep this arrangement clean," she said. "A marriage of mutual respect. We protect both families' interests. We do not confuse proximity for feeling. In a few years, when the merger has settled and no one is watching, we divorce over irreconcilable differences. Quietly, no mess." Every sentence landed like a nail going in straight. It was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to me, and I recognize how that sounds. "Understood," I said. "You're taking this well." "I'm a very reasonable man." She studied me for a beat too long, the way you'd study a bill that seemed too low. Then she nodded and went to change, and I lay back against Una's paper hearts and made a decision I did not announce. I was going to win her, not corner her, not trick her. Win her the slow way, the way you earn a cat that has decided you are furniture, one boring patient kindness at a time until the day it climbs into your lap and pretends that was always the plan. I had 5 years of practice wanting this woman from a polite distance. Now I lived with her. I liked my odds. My heart, that unbalanced washing machine, agreed at a volume I had to shush. I woke at 6:15 because I always wake at 6:15, a habit my body enforces like a landlord. Rianne was already up, already armored, already reading something on her phone that was making a subordinate's morning worse. I did the only strategic thing I could think of. I made her coffee, not romantically. I want to be accurate. I had noticed over 5 years of not looking that she drank it black with exactly 1 sugar stirred, and that she resented a spoon left in the cup. So I made it black, 1 sugar stirred, spoon removed, and set it beside her without a word, the way you leave food for something wild you don't want to spook. She glanced at the cup, then at me, then at the cup again, doing visible arithmetic. "Black, 1 sugar, no spoon." "How did you know how I take it?" she said. It was not a question. It was a small door opening a crack, and I did not lunge at it. "Lucky guess," I said, and went to shower before my face could betray 5 years of study. By the time I came down, the good part of the morning was over because Una was back. She had not, it turned out, actually left the city. She'd left the wedding, a distinction she clearly found meaningful and I found hilarious. And now she was arranged on the sofa with Damon's hand in hers, chin up, radiant with the confidence of a woman who believes love is a legal defense. Damon stood when I entered. Of course he stood. He had the posture of a man who had practiced sincerity in a mirror and the soft hands of someone who had never once carried anything heavier than someone else's wife. He opened his mouth to say something gentle and self-flagellating. I walked past him like weather. "Son," Vera started out of an old habit. I'd been her almost son-in-law for 2 years, then corrected herself because they'd all been told there were new rules. She rose, doing damage control before there was visible damage. "Kai, about Una's sister-in-law," I said. The room stopped. Vera blinked. "I'm sorry." "You're my wife's sister-in-law by marriage," I said, mild as milk. "Rianne A. is Soren's daughter. I'm Rianne A.'s husband. That makes me Una's uncle-in-law and makes you respectfully my elder-in-law's peer. Andy would be strange now. Sister-in-law is correct." I gave her a small courteous nod, the kind you give someone you've just relocated 3 rungs down a ladder they didn't know they were standing on. Una's mouth opened. Nothing came out for a full 2 seconds, I counted, which for Una was a personal record. "You're being childish," she managed. "I'm being accurate," I said. "There's a difference and you married past it." Soren's cane found the floor. 1 tap, the room refroze in the other direction. Enough. He looked at all of us the way a man looks at livestock that has embarrassed him. The past engagement is closed. Kai is married to Rian A. Yuna will marry whom she likes and answer for it. From this house no one raises the old arrangement again. It is finished. He stood, joints and authority creaking in unison. We do not air our disgraces twice. And that was that because in that family Soren's sentences were the last draft. I should have felt triumphant. Mostly I felt Rian's eyes on the side of my face. She'd come down at some point and watched the whole thing without a word, arms crossed, reading me the way she'd read the coffee. When our eyes met she didn't smile. But something behind her said warmed by maybe half a degree, which on Rian's scale is a heat wave. Here's the part that told me exactly how this was going to go. Later, alone, Yuna texted me not an apology, a theory. You don't have to pretend, it read. I know why you married her. It's okay. I understand you. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't being generous. I wasn't. My ex-fiancé had watched me marry the woman of my dreams and concluded I'd done it out of heartbreak over her, that I was so wrecked by losing Yuna that I'd grabbed the nearest ant as a bandage. The correct move was to shatter that fantasy on sight. I put the phone face down instead because a person who thinks you're still theirs will hand you every weakness they've got, one confident message at a time, and I had no intention of interrupting her. Let her understand me. It was the least accurate she'd ever been, and I needed her to stay that way for a while. Yuna announced her relationship to the internet at 9:40 on a Tuesday, which tells you something about a person. 9:40, not morning, not lunch, the dead hour. The hour you post when you've been staring at the draft since 8 o'clock. It was a selfie, her cheek on Damon's shoulder, his mirror-rehearsed smile aimed just past the lens, and a caption that read, "Some things are worth losing everything for." 300 likes in an hour. The comments were a museum of people being polite in public and screenshotting in private. My phone lit up before I'd finished reading it. The group chat is 3 people. Me, Theo. And John, who treats every event in my life as the season finale of a show he is personally invested in. John communicates primarily in one-word verdicts, like an oracle who charges by the syllable. Theo, have you seen it? Theo, worth losing everything for? She lost a wedding and a merger, my guy. Theo, this is the most expensive caption in history. John, tacky. Theo, Kai, are you okay? Blink twice. Theo, are you crying into your $1 billion? I typed, I'm fine. Theo, he's alive. John, suspicious. They weren't wrong to be suspicious. I was fine. I was, in fact, better than fine, and that was the thing I couldn't put in a group chat without it sounding like a symptom. Because here is what Yuna didn't understand about announcing your love to the whole world, it invites the whole world to compare. And she had just volunteered to be compared to Rian. I found my wife in the study reviewing something that had numbers in it. I set my phone on the desk, screen up, Yuna's post glowing between us. She went public, I said. Rian read it. Her expression didn't change, which with Rian is a kind of change. Worth losing everything for, she quoted. She hasn't lost everything yet. That's a forward-looking statement, spoken like a woman who audits feelings. I think we should respond, I said. With what? With being better. We took a photo. I'd like to pretend it was strategic and only strategic. We stood by the tall study window where the afternoon light does flattering things, and because of the angle you could only see us in profile, which is the setting in which 2 people looked the most like a movie poster and the least like 2 people who signed a contract. I lifted my phone. At the exact moment I pressed the shutter, Renee tilted in closer than the composition required, close enough that I felt the warmth come off her and my thumb betrayed me and took the shot anyway. I looked at the photo. It was objectively unfair. We looked like a fragrance ad. We looked like the reason the fragrance exists. I posted it. Caption reasonable legal hers. I sent it to Renee and told her to post the same. She did without argument, which I noted. The comments arrived like weather rolling in. And here was the detail that mattered. They were the same people. Renee's friends and mine overlapped almost completely. We've been circling the same rooms for years, close enough to comment on each other's lives and too proud to say so. So both posts filled with the identical crowd congratulating us twice from 2 windows on a marriage everyone had assumed would be a hostage situation. Under Yuna's post, politeness, curiosity, and the specific silence of people saving their real opinions for the group chat. Under ours, an avalanche. Yuna texted me 11 minutes later, delete it. Then before I could not answer, you're only doing this because you're hurt. I get it. Don't embarrass yourself. I'll take mine down too. She was building a story where my flexing was heartbreak and her cheating was destiny, and she was casting me as the pining ex who couldn't let go. I read it and felt something close to admiration. It takes real commitment to be this wrong on purpose. I blocked her. Then, and I want to be honest about the pettiness here, I unblocked her 30 seconds later because blocking meant she couldn't watch. And I decided the crueler thing was to leave the window open. Let her refresh. Let her count our likes against hers. A block is mercy. I wasn't feeling merciful. I typed one message and let it be the last thing she could see before I blocked her again for real. I'm not hurt and I'm not deleting anything. You lost a fiancé you didn't want and a family you did. Sit with the math. Send, block, silence. Somewhere across the city, I imagined a red exclamation mark. I found the image sustaining. When I looked up, Renee was watching me from the doorway with her arms crossed, and she'd been there long enough to have read all of it upside down, which she was clearly capable of doing. Feel better? She asked. Marginally. She crossed the room and this is the part one keep. She took my hand. To sell the photo, technically, a friend had asked in the comments if we'd hold hands for the next one for the act. That was the reason available to both of us and I reached for it gratefully. Except the photo was already posted. There was no one in the study to perform for. No lens, no comment section, no audience, but the numbers on her spreadsheet which do not care about romance. She held my hand anyway, didn't pull away, didn't explain. Laced her cool fingers through mine like it was a clause she'd added to the contract without telling me, and had decided I didn't need to sign. I did not point this out. You don't spook the wild thing when it's finally in your lap. But I filed it, right at the top of a folder I was quietly building labeled Renee is playing along more than the game requires. The folder had one document in it now. I had a feeling it was going to get thick. People assumed that because I looked tired I am harmless. This is the single most useful misunderstanding of my life, and I have never once corrected it. I run crisis and communications for my family's group. It's a job that sounds like standing near a photocopier, and is actually more like diffusing things other people armed by accident. That Thursday, a mid-level manager of ours got filmed being rude to a waiter, and by 11 o'clock in the morning, the clip had a life of its own, 30,000 views. The comments sharpening their knives, our stock ticking down in the small mean way stocks do when strangers are disappointed in you. My sister Nora appeared in my doorway, immaculate as always, already enjoying my problem. Well, she said, the internet has decided we hate waiters. I watched the clip 4 times. Not for the rudeness, for the timestamp, the angle, the thing everyone else was too busy being outraged to notice. The video started after the argument. Someone had trimmed the first 90 seconds, the part where the manager was in fact apologizing. I didn't put out a statement calling anyone a liar. You never win by calling the mob a mob. I got the full footage, released the missing 90 seconds without commentary, let the crowd discover the edit themselves, and by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the story had reversed so hard the manager was trending as a folk hero who tips well. I didn't say a word publicly. Receipts don't need a voice. They just need to arrive. You're a little frightening, Nora said admiringly and left. I mention this only so you understand what I do for a living before I tell you about the parking garage. Renee had a late board thing so I killed the afternoon at a shopping center, which is where I ran into Roan. Roan is one of those men assembled entirely from good tailoring and unearned certainty. He'd wanted Renee for years. The kind of wanting that never risks a rejection because it prefers the fantasy, and he greeted me with a smile he'd clearly been saving. Kai, he said, warm as a handshake at a funeral. The stand-in groom, how's married life treating the consolation prize? You'd have to ask Renee which of us is the prize, I said. I already know the answer. You're bracing for it. His smile developed a hairline crack. It won't last, you know. A woman like her married off in a panic to a boy 5 years younger, she'll come to her senses. She came to them at the altar, I said. That's the part you keep skipping. He opened his mouth for round 2 and my phone buzzed. Renee done early, pick you up. I let Roan watch me read it, let a slow insufferable warmth move across my face, and typed back West Entrance. He clocked the exact moment I stopped listening to him. That's her, I said, pocketing the phone. You're welcome to wait and say hello. Fair warning, you'll be waiting outside and she doesn't stop for weather. He waited. Of course he waited. Men like Roan will stand 3 hours in a cold garage for a woman who has never once thought about them because the alternative is admitting she hasn't. Renee pulled up 8 minutes later. She did not so much as glance at Roan, who had arranged himself hopefully near a pillar. She looked at me, said get in, and drove off, and the last thing I saw in the mirror was Roan discovering in real time that he was scenery, cheap, Enormously. Did I enjoy it? I'm only human and barely that before dinner. That night Renee came home soaked. The board thing had run long, the sky had opened on her walk from the car and she came through the door looking like a very expensive cat that had lost an argument with a hose. Furious, dripping and daring anyone to comment. I didn't comment, I got a towel. She stood there while I dried her hair and I want to be precise about the physics of this because it's the whole point. She could have taken the towel. She had 2 working hands and a lifetime of not needing anyone. She let me do it. I worked the water out gently section by section, then found the wide-tooth comb and started at the ends the way you're supposed to. The way nobody with money ever learns because someone's always been paid to. She went very still under my hands, not stiff, still, the stillness of a person deciding not to move in case moving ends it. You cook, you make coffee, you dry hair, she said quietly. Where does this end? Whenever you tell it to, I said and kept combing. She didn't tell it to. I made dinner after, nothing showy, the kind of plain good food you make for someone who's had 11 hours of other people. She watched me from the counter the entire time, chin on her hand, and for once she wasn't auditing anything. She was just watching. Me in a kitchen being reliable at her. I set the plate down, black coffee, 1 sugar, no spoon beside it because at this point it was a language. She looked at the plate and the coffee and then at me, and something in her face did the half-degree thing again, except it held this time, warm and unwilling in there. Thank you, she said, 2 words. From Renee, a sonnet. I said eat before it's cold instead of anything true because the true thing would have scared us both, and went to wash a pan I'd already washed. Behind me I heard her pull out the chair and then I heard it. I didn't imagine it, I heard her scoot it half a foot closer to where I'd be sitting. Not enough to remark on, just enough that when I sat our shoulders would have an opinion about each other. I added a document to the folder. It was getting thick, exactly like I'd promised myself. Here is a thing people misunderstand about revenge: the satisfying kind is boring to watch and impossible to argue with. It doesn't shout, it files paperwork. Renee's version of vengeance looked from the outside exactly like good governance, which is why nobody could lay a finger on it. It started at a quarterly review in a glass conference room with a slide deck. Una held a title at the group, a soft one, the kind you give the founder's granddaughter so the org chart has a nice shape. She oversaw brand partnerships, which mostly meant showing up to lunches. That morning Renee, as heir and now effectively running the room, presented a restructuring column numbered devastating. Brand partnerships would fold under corporate communications. Una's discretionary account, the one she'd been treating like a faucet, would route through approvals. And Una herself would be transferred to the West Branch, 3 hours out, to develop regional presence. A phrase that means we would like you geographically distant from anything that matters. Renee's assistant. Myra handed out the packets with the serene efficiency of someone who has waited a long time to hand out these particular packets. Myra is crisp, loyal, and enjoys her job on days like this in a way she is too professional to show and too human to fully hide. Una read the page. The blood left her face on schedule. You're punishing me, she said. I'm reallocating an underperforming division, Renee said without heat. You abandoned a wedding in front of 400 people. You announced a private relationship on a public account attached to this company's name. You generated 3 news cycles we had to manage. Every line on this page is a documented response to a documented cost. If you'd like, I'll walk you through the costs. I have them itemized. She slid a second sheet across the table and it was, God help us all, itemized. That's the trap. There was nothing to fight. Una wanted a villain and got an accountant. And you cannot cry to your grandfather that the balance sheet is being mean to you. She tried anyway. Vera tried for her. Vera cornered me that evening in the garden. She does her scheming in gardens, I've noticed, as if the flowers lent her sincerity. Kai, she said, warm as a heat lamp over cold food, you're a reasonable man. Una's just lost right now. Give her time, she'll see clearly. And she does, a delicate pause, a hand on my arm, you'll still be here. You two were always meant to be. Just wait for her. I looked at this woman who genuinely believed her daughter was a flawless egg and the world was simply full of flies. I thought about how much simpler her life would be if she'd once, even once, been right about anything. Sister-in-law, I said gently, you keep asking me to wait for Una as if I'm the one holding the leash. But I'm married, happily, to your husband's sister. If you want someone to wait for Una to come to her senses, ask Rianne. She's the one deciding what Una gets to come back to. Vera's smile stiffened into taxidermy. She'd come to enlist me against Rianne and left understanding that I was Rianne's cheerfully all the way down. Every scheme she brought me rebounded like this. It was becoming a hobby of hers, walking into rooms to lose. I went home lighter than I'd left. Rianne was in the entryway shedding her coat, tired in the specific way that comes from being right at people all day. She looked up at me, and something in me, some 5-year-old ache that had learned to keep quiet, just moved without asking permission. I kissed her forehead, just that. A press of lips to her hairline. The most chaste thing in the world, the kind of kiss you give someone to say you made it home, and so did I. I did it before I could talk myself out of it. And then I braced, because with Rianne you always brace. She went still, not the flinch I'd feared. The other stillness, the one from the towel, the one that means don't you dare make this a moment or I'll have to end it. That's new, she said very quietly. You look like you've been right at people all day, I said. Somebody should be soft at you instead. She didn't answer, but she didn't step back either. And after a second she let her forehead tip forward to rest against my collarbone, just for a breath, just long enough to be a decision. Rianne, who could make an avalanche reconsider its route, stood in the entryway and let herself be soft at for exactly one breath, and then straightened and walked to the study like it hadn't happened. I let it not have happened. That's the deal. You let the wild thing keep its dignity. Meanwhile, across the city, and I only reconstructed this later from the wreckage and the way people talk, a very different version of events was being authored. Una sat in the apartment Damon liked, telling him it was all Renee's jealousy, that her aunt had always envied her, that the transfer was spite, that once Una proved herself at the West Branch she'd claw back everything and everyone would see. She said it with the total confidence of a woman who has never had to be right to be believed. Damon nodded and murmured the correct sympathetic things. He was very good at the correct sympathetic things, but he'd also gone quiet in a new way. And if Una had been watching his face instead of her own reflection, she'd have caught it, the small cooling recalculation of a man reviewing an investment that had just been marked down. The look of someone doing math on a person. She didn't catch it. She was too busy being sure. The first crack in Damon showed up at a charity dinner, which is the natural habitat of people pretending to be better than their bank statements. I wasn't looking for it. I was looking for the shrimp. But you spend enough years reading rooms for a living and your eyes go where the tension is. And the tension was a woman across the ballroom, mid-40s, real jewelry, the kind of poise you can't buy, who went pale the instant Damon walked in on Una's arm. Not starstruck pale, haunted pale. The specific color of someone seeing a debt walk through the door in a rented tux. I filed it. I file everything. It's a condition. Then two things happened close together, the way things do right before a story turns. The first, Una decided to make a scene at me. It was later near the bar and she'd clearly spent the evening marinating in her new grievances. She stepped into my path with Damon trailing and announced, loud enough for a useful radius, that I was pathetic, that I'd married her aunt to spite her, that everyone could see I was still hung up on her, that I should stop embarrassing myself. A younger me might have engaged. Present me was calculating the exact wattage of the smile that would cost her the most when I didn't have to spend anything at all, because Renee arrived. She didn't hurry. Renee doesn't hurry. The world adjusts to her tempo or gets left. She crossed the floor, slid her hand into the crook of my arm like it lived there, and looked at Una with an expression she might use on a spreadsheet error. You're raising your voice at your uncle, Renee said, cool, carrying, at a public event under both families' names. A pause you could have parked a car in. Whatever you think of Kai, he is my husband and your senior. You will speak to him with the manners this family paid a great deal to give you, or you will not speak to him at all. Choose quickly. People are watching, and unlike you, I remember that. The radius went silent. Una's mouth worked. Damon developed a sudden fascination with the carpet, and I stood there being publicly defended by the most formidable woman in 3 time zones, and had to physically restrain my face from doing something undignified and sincere. Nobody had ever done that for me, not once. I'd never needed it. I'd grown up armored. I fight my own fights. I win most of them from a seated position. But needing and being are different things, and being stood in front of being claimed out loud in a crowded room by a woman who does not waste words on things she doesn't mean. That landed somewhere I didn't have a file for. Una chose to leave. It was the first correct decision I'd seen her make. The second thing happened in the car. The woman in the emerald, I said, 3rd table. She saw Damon and aged 5 years. Rianne driving didn't look over. You noticed that too. I notice everything. It's exhausting. I turned my phone in my hand. That wasn't a stranger's face. That was a face that's already paid for a man like him. By the next morning I'd pulled a thread. Quietly, no leaks, no noise, just the overlapping friend circles Yuna had never understood were a network and not a nuisance. It took 3 calls. The woman in the emerald had 2 years ago invested in a fund a charming young man introduced her to. The fund evaporated. The young man evaporated with it. She'd eaten the loss rather than the humiliation, which is exactly what men like him bank on. The name on the fund wasn't Damon. It was close though. It was the kind of not quite name a person uses when they intend to need a new one. I didn't move on it. That's the discipline. You don't fire a receipt the moment you have it. You wait for the moment it does the most damage and you let the target keep building the gallows in the meantime. I put it in the folder, a different folder now, a heavier one, the kind with a lawyer's number paper clipped to the inside cover. I got home late. And here is the one that reorganized my whole week. The lamp was on. Renee was asleep on the study couch, a report tented on her chest, and she'd left the lamp on and the door open, and I checked. I couldn't help it. My usual spot on the couch conspicuously clear, her feet tucked up to leave exactly one person's worth of room. She'd waited up. She'd fallen asleep waiting up in a house with 11 bedrooms on the one couch that faced the door I'd come through. I stood there like an idiot, a man who reads rooms for a living, reading the loudest room of his life. I lifted the report off her chest so it wouldn't slide. She stirred halfway awake, unguarded, no armor on at all, and reached out and caught my sleeve the way you grab a railing in the dark. Then she realized she'd done it. I watched the exact instant she caught herself, the flicker of a woman appalled to be found reaching. Her fingers started to withdraw, so I looked away, made myself very busy folding a blanket that did not need folding. Gave her 3 full seconds of privacy to pretend it hadn't happened and said to the blanket, "Go back to sleep. You've got the West Branch numbers at 9. When I turned back around, she hadn't taken her hand off my sleeve after all. She just stopped pretending she hadn't meant to. I've been to some very good days. I own a company's worth of good days. That quiet one, standing in a lamplit study while a woman who'd wanted me for years finally let me see it, is somewhere near the front, and I noted, so close to the front that I was going to have to renovate my ranking of good days entirely. By the time Vera called for family dinner, I had a folder that could end a man, and I had a wife who reached for my hand under the table before anyone told her to. I'll take them in that order. The dossier came together over a week of quiet evenings, Renee and me at study table, 2 lamps and a pot of coffee, black, 1 sugar, no spoon, twice because we'd become the kind of people who drank it the same way now. Renee had access no private investigator could dream of, the family's own networks, the banks that owed the family favors, the polite machinery of real money. I had the pattern reading. Together we were frankly unfair. The picture assembled itself like a mosaic that had been waiting to be noticed. The Emerald Woman was not the first. There'd been one before her in another city, a widow, a wine import fund, the same evaporation. And one before that, different names each time, all cousins of his real one, all close enough to answer to but too different to trace without knowing to look. He targeted wealthy women in the soft season of their lives. Recently widowed, recently divorced, recently disappointed, offered devotion and a can't-miss fund, and left with the deposit. Yuna wasn't a romance to Damon. She was a position he'd taken, and the family fortune behind her was the yield. We didn't leak a page of it. We closed the folder and went to dinner. Vera had staged the meal the way she stages everything, the good china, the soft lighting, an ambush dressed as a reconciliation. She waited until the plates were down and Soren was seated at the head, and then she made her play. "I've been thinking," she said in the voice of a woman who rehearses spontaneity, "that we've all been hasty. Yuna is family. This transfer, this cold treatment, it isn't like us." A warm look around the table landing on me last. Perhaps it's time to talk about bringing Yuna home to her real place in the company. And at the delicate pause, the one I'd learned to dread, to reconsider certain rushed decisions. Nothing is truly permanent. Marriages have been quietly undone before. There it was, she wanted to unwind me and reshelve Yuna in front of everyone over dessert. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. That's the beauty of a room with Soren in it. You let the facts walk to the head of the table on their own. Yuna's division underperformed for 6 straight quarters before the wedding, Renee said, setting down her fork, not raising her voice. She never does. Her transfer was a documented business decision ratified by this board in response to costs she generated. If you'd like it reversed, bring the numbers that justify it. I'll wait. She let the silence stretch. No numbers came because none existed. As for undoing marriages, mine is not a rushed decision to be reconsidered at a dinner table. It's the one thing in this family I'm entirely certain of. She said the last part looking at me. In front of Soren, in front of Vera, in front of God and the good china. And then, under the table where no one could see and it could only be for me, she took my hand. I have been in negotiations worth 9 figures. I have watched a stock recover in an afternoon because I timed a sentence correctly. Nothing in my professional life prepared me for Riini holding my hand under a table while telling her entire family that she meant it. Soren tapped his cane once. The transfer stands, he said. The marriage is not a topic. He looked at Vera the way you look at a scheme you've already priced and found cheap. You've raised the old arrangement in my house again. I told you not to. Do not make me tell you a third time. He returned to his soup. Vera sat in the ruin of her own dinner party, having invited everyone over to watch her lose. Una, who'd been brought as the guest of honor at her own reinstatement, understood at last that there would be no reinstatement. She looked at me for help of all things, the reflex of a woman who still believed I was secretly hers, and I gave her nothing but the polite blankness you'd give a stranger's child having a tantrum. That would have been enough, a clean night. But there was one more thing, and it arrived by phone, and it changed the temperature of everything. A name surfaced in Damon's paper trail. Not a victim this time, a destination. His newest fund had a new anchor investor being courted, an introduction he'd been chasing through the widow circuit, and the money behind it, the mark he was reeling toward, belonged to a man named Cashin. I knew the name the way you know the name of a bridge you don't jump off. Cashin is not soft season. Cashin is not a lonely widow with more grief than counsel. Cashin is the kind of money that has its own security, its own lawyers, and a very specific policy about people who touch what's his. Damon had spent his whole career choosing marks who would eat the loss to keep the shame. He just aimed himself at the one man on earth who eats people instead. I set down my phone, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the need to do anything at all. Some gallows you build. Others the target insists on hammering together himself, whistling, measuring his own neck for the rope. What is it? Riini asked, her hand still in mine. Nothing, I said, and meant it in the best possible way. I think Damon's about to save us the trouble. Damon started slipping the way a tide goes out, so gradually that by the time Una noticed the water was gone, she was standing on wet sand insisting it was still the beach. I didn't have to leak the dossier. I'd built it for a rainy day and the weather turned on its own. Damon's pivot toward Cashin's orbit meant he was suddenly moving in rooms with better-informed people, and better-informed people talk. The Emerald Woman, it turned out, had a sister. The sister had a lunch. And once one victim realizes she isn't the only one, silence stops being protection and starts being a cage she wants out of. The whisper became a hum. The hum reached the kind of people who Google before they wire money. By the time it circled back to our world, it had a shape: young man, several cities, several names, several evaporated funds, always a wealthy woman left holding the loss. No headline yet, just the pre-tremor rich circles feel before the ground formally opens. Una, of course, defended him. She came to the house uninvited. She still had the reflex of belonging here and found me in the entryway. She'd heard the whispers. She'd come to declare them beneath her. People are jealous, she announced. They've always been jealous of me. Now they're inventing things about Damon because they can't stand that I chose real love over your cold little arrangement. She said cold little arrangement while standing in a house where someone waited up for me with a lamp on. The irony was doing more heavy lifting than she'd ever done. Una, I said almost gently, I'm not going to argue with you. I'll just say one thing and you can do with it what you like. Ask him where the money from the Damien fund went. Watch his face while he answers, not his words. His face. There's no Damien. His name is Damon. Close though, isn't it? I said ask him about that too. She left angrier than she came, which is the reliable outcome of telling Una something true. She would defend Damon louder now, digging harder. Burn whatever bridges she had left, and every plank she torched was one less way back for her later. I didn't enjoy it. That's not true. I enjoyed it a normal healthy amount and then stopped thinking about it. Because Damon had already done the math she refused to. He'd watched Una get frozen out, the title gone, the account gated, the exile to the West Branch, and he'd updated his valuation in real time. A Una with the family fortune behind her was a position worth holding. A Una cut off from it was just a loud, expensive woman with no yield. So, he did what men like him always do the instant the return disappears. He began quietly to leave. Fewer calls, vaguer plans, his attention drifting toward Cashin's brighter, richer light like a moth that has never once considered how moths end. Una was standing on wet sand calling it the beach. I could have watched that all night, but the night had something else for me and I didn't see it coming, which almost never happens. Rianne found me on the study balcony past midnight. She didn't sit. She stood at the rail beside me close, looking out at the city instead of at me, which is how people talk when the thing they're saying is too big to say to a face. You want to know why I'm like this? She said, not a question. Cold with everyone. I want whatever you want to give me, I said, no more than that. She was quiet for a moment. The heat hummed underneath us. I noticed you a long time ago, she said, years at the dinners, the events, all those rooms we were both trapped in. You thought you were being subtle. A ghost of something crossed her mouth. You weren't. You'd look at me like I was whether you were bracing for, and you'd look away the second I turned every time for years. My whole chest went still. You saw that. I saw all of it, and I'll tell you something I've never said out loud. She kept her eyes on the skyline. I liked it. I liked being wanted like that, quietly, hopelessly, by someone who never once tried to cash it in. Do you know how rare that is in my world? A man who wants something and doesn't reach for it. I'd have given a great deal to reach back. Then why didn't you? Because you were hers. She said it flat, final, the wall she'd lived behind. You were promised to my niece, and whatever I am, and I'm a lot of unpleasant things, Kai, ask anyone, I do not take what belongs at another woman's table. So, I did the only thing I could. I went cold. I stayed away. I let you think I couldn't stand you because that was safer than letting either of us see what I actually felt. She finally turned and looked at me. For 5 years I was fond of a man I had decided I was not allowed to have. I couldn't breathe correctly. And now, something in her face opened just at the edges, just enough, and for 1 second the most guarded woman I'd ever known let me see the whole of it. Now, she said quietly, she climbed out a window and handed you to me herself. A breath. I wasn't allowed to look back until she made sure I could. And then because she is who she is, because letting me see that much had already cost her more than she'd spend on anyone else, she reached up, brushed her thumb once along my jaw like she was checking I was real, and walked back inside before I could say a single one of the 10,000 things rising in my throat. She left me alone on the balcony with a confession that had stopped just short of the word. I stood there in the cold, grinning like an idiot at a skyline. A man who had wanted one specific impossible thing for 5 years and had just been told almost that he'd had it all along. It ended for Damon the way it always ends for men who mistake other people's patience for other people's stupidity, fast and in public and entirely by his own hand. He'd been courting Cashin's fun for weeks, which meant courting Cashin's world, which meant getting close to the woman at Cashin's side. And Damon only had one move, devotion aimed like a tool. He ran it on her the way he'd run it on the widow, on the emerald woman, on Yuna, the soft voice, the lingering hand, the certainty that a beautiful woman near powerful money must be bored and available. He misread her completely. She wasn't soft season. She was Cashin's, and she told Cashin exactly what the charming young fund manager had tried with his hand where it had no business being. Cashin's people had already been quietly pulling Damon's thread. You don't let a stranger near your money without checking his seams. They had the aliases, they had the evaporated funds, they had the Emerald Woman's sister and 3 others besides and a whole hum of victims who once someone with real lawyers came asking discovered they were suddenly very willing to talk. All Damon's overreach did was tell Cashin to stop being quiet. The tremor became the earthquake in a single afternoon. Fraud across multiple names, multiple victims, and stapled to the top of it the specific and unforgivable sin of putting his hands on the wrong man's partner. Cashin did not want money back. Cashin wanted a decade, and Cashin was the kind of man who got the sentence he ordered off the menu. They arrested Damon on a Tuesday, 9:40 in the morning as it happened. I like to think Yuna appreciated the symmetry, though I doubt she was in a symmetry mood because Damon had already left her by then. He'd done it before the cuffs, the moment the frost reached him, the instant it was clear Yuna had no fortune. No title, no family door left open, and was now radioactive besides. He didn't even do her the courtesy of a fight. He simply stopped answering, the way he'd stopped answering all of them, and moved his devotion to a brighter light that turned out to be a furnace. Yuna, who had abandoned a wedding, a fiancé, a family, and a fortune for the great love of her life, learned that the great love of her life had been running a tab the entire time, and that she'd been the section of the bill he skipped out on. She ended up exactly where her choices deposited her, cut off because the freeze was real, and Soren does not thaw for tantrums. Alone because the man was gone, and the family she'd humiliated felt no urgent need to catch her. Broke in the practical, unglamorous sense once the gated account stayed gated and the West Branch salary turned out to be an actual salary. Last I heard, she was telling anyone who'd listen that she'd been the victim. She was, technically, of herself. It's the only crime she ever committed against that family that actually stuck. There was one last spasm before the quiet. As Damon's name burned, someone Vera were fairly sure. In the final flailing of a woman whose schemes and gardens tried to drag us into the fire. A whisper got seeded that Rianne and I had orchestrated all of it, engineered Una's ruin, conspired across two companies to steal her place. Got a little traction. Ruin always wants company, and a good conspiracy is more fun than a boring truth. We killed it in an afternoon together, and I have never enjoyed a work day more. I didn't issue a denial. You never argue with a mob. I've said this. I did what I do. I released the raw material and let people find the edit themselves. The timeline showing the marriage happened in front of 400 witnesses with zero prior contact between the families. The board minutes proving Una's transfer predated any scheme and was numbers, only numbers. The public record of who ran from whose wedding. Rianne A. from her side of it put out one cold, surgical statement and pointed the family's lawyers at the accounts spreading it. Between her machinery and my method, the story didn't just die. It reversed and turned on the people who'd started it. By evening, the internet had decided correctly that the only villains in this story were the two who'd cast themselves as its heroes. We did it side by side at the study table, 2 lamps, coffee twice, and somewhere in the middle of dismantling a smear campaign, I looked up and understood that this two people who protect each other by reflex was the actual marriage. The paperwork had just been early. Rianne caught me looking. "You're staring," she said. "I'm bracing," I said, "old habit." And she set down her pen and she looked at me across 5 years and 1 wedding and a dead scandal. And for once, Rianne did the thing she never does. She went first. "I love you," she said plainly, the way she says true things. "Not the contract, not the alliance. I decided I couldn't have you and then I got to, and I've been too proud to say the word out loud since the balcony. So there it is, the word." I opened my mouth. She crossed the room before I could waste the moment on language. Took my face in both hands, the most dangerous, composed, impossible woman I'd wanted since before I knew better, and she kissed me. Not for a camera, not for a family, not for show, for her. Finally, unmistakably for her. I had spent 5 years pretending not to look. I stopped pretending. I'll spare you the rest except to say the study lamps went off and neither of us worked another minute that night. And the last of the distance we'd been keeping for the sake of a contract quietly stopped existing. In the morning she was still there, warm, unarmored, her head on my chest and her cold reserved for the first time I'd ever seen entirely for the rest of the world and not 1 degree of it for me. I lay very still so as not to end it. People kept calling the wedding the worst day of my life, the day I got left at the altar, the day I lost. I've been trying to tell them for months. It was the luckiest day of my life. It just took everyone else a while to catch up to the math. Here is the thing about consequences: they're patient. They don't need you to gloat. They show up on their own schedule, do the work, and never once ask for credit. Damon got his decade, a little more actually, once the victims stopped being ashamed and started being witnesses. The widow, the emerald woman, her sister, a line of people who'd each thought they were the only fool, discovering they were a chapter in a long boring book. The charm that had carried him across 4 cities did nothing at all in a courtroom, where they don't grade on eye contact. Kashan never appeared in person. He didn't have to. Men like Kashan are a weather system. You don't meet the storm, you just notice the roof is gone. Last I checked, Damon was learning that prison has its own soft season, and that he was for once the one being circled. Una did not make a comeback. I know the genre promises one, the fallen princess who claws her way back and shows them all. But that story requires a person willing to look at herself, and Una had spent her whole life being told the mirror was jealous. She stayed at the West Branch. The account stayed gated. Soren, who could have taught her with a single sentence, declined to spend the sentence. She chose, he told me once, tapping his cane, let her eat at it. She still tells people she was wronged, she's right. She just has the culprit wrong and always will. Vera's garden schemes ended in the garden. When the smear she'd seeded reversed and rolled back over her, the family that had tolerated her ambitions stopped tolerating them. And she learned that a woman who spends every dinner trying to win eventually runs out of people willing to set her a place. She and Una have each other now. I'm told they mostly argue. 2 people who insisted they were owed the world left holding only each other's complaints. There's a justice in that no lawyer could have drafted. And Roan, I almost forgot Roan, which is itself the whole story. He told me in a parking garage that felt like a lifetime ago that the marriage wouldn't last, that Renee would come to her senses. He kept waiting for it the way he waited near that pillar, certain the world would eventually correct itself in his favor. It didn't. We ran into him once more at some function, and he opened his mouth to say something clever about how well we were holding up. And Renee simply took my arm and walked us past him mid-sentence, and I realized she'd never once in all this time learned his name. Some men spend years being a woman's obstacle. Roan never even made it to scenery. He was whether she didn't check. As for the two of us, nothing dramatic. That's the point. The two groups stayed separate in the day-to-day, which is how they should have always been. Her family's side hers, mine. The alliance on paper stayed real. We just never dissolved into each other. Never let one bloodstream run both houses. We kept our own desks and our own fights and our own coffee. Though we drank it the same way now, black, one sugar, no spoon. An entire marriage encoded in a beverage. On paper we changed almost nothing. Everywhere off paper we changed completely. She still calls me husband in public the way she used to weaponize it to enforce a rank. Except now I can hear the difference. It used to be a wall she put between Yuna and me. Now it's just true, and she says it like it's true. And once at a dinner in front of people who'd known her as ice for a decade, I watched a business rival flinch when Rianne said the word because he heard the warmth in it and couldn't reconcile it with everything he thought he knew about her. She stayed cold to that entire room. She has kept that. The unreadable eyes, the stillness that reads as a warning, the tempo the world adjusts to. To the widow hunters and the roans and the boardroom sharks, Rianne is exactly the loaded weapon she's always been. She just points a different thing at me now. She saves the warmth like a secret, and she spends it only when the door's closed and it's the two of us and there's no one left to perform for. I used to be a man who read every room for a living. Now I live in the one room I can't read because the woman in it stopped hiding from me and there's nothing left to decode. It's the most disoriented I've ever been. I recommend it. I never did wear the wounded groom face again. I'd built it so carefully that first day, the brave breath, the tragic jaw, the whole performance of a good man, the world had failed. I retired it in the vestibule and never needed it since. Turns out you only need to look heartbroken when you're pretending. When you actually get the thing you wanted, your face just does it on its own, and it's a much stupider expression and you don't care who sees it. People still bring up the wedding sometimes, the one where the bride went out a window. They lower their voices when they do it, the way you do around the recently bereaved. And they tell me how sorry they are, how humiliating it must have been, how strong I'm being. I let them. It's kinder than the truth. And the truth is embarrassing anyway because a woman I couldn't stand to lose ran out a bathroom window. And in doing it handed me the one I couldn't stand to be without, and set the whole thing in motion by accident, like a person tripping a wire she didn't know was there. I've done the math 100 ways since. It always comes out the same. She jumped 41 inches to get away from me. Best fall of my life.